these Ivorian authorities embarking on a night patrol aren't looking for arms dealers, nor for gold or ivory traffickers.
This is a trafficking hub here. It's a border zone, and cocoa is produced here.
Along the border, this 200-man unit has one objective: to prevent cocoa beans grown in the country from being taken into neighbouring Guinea or Liberia, where they are sold at a much higher price. This year alone, 150,000 tonnes of beans have been exported illegally.
There are normal farmers who can become traffickers, but there are also well-organized groups who have contacts on the other side of the border.
That night, the Colonel's unit receives a tip-off. A suspicious storage site was identified a few kilometres from the border with Guinea. After hours on the road, the team arrives at dawn.
If we are going to arrest someone, it will be the owner of the house.
But the owner seems to have disappeared. To carry out the search, the authorities need a villager to volunteer as a witness. But, for fear of repercussions or because trafficking might actually benefit them, for several hours, no one agrees to cooperate.
To prevent any problems, we can't open the door unless someone's here. We'll just open it and have a look. There's an officer from the Coffee and Cocoa Board who's going to come and say whether the cocoa here is okay, whether it's for someone, or whether it's cocoa you've hidden to go to Guinea. That's all we want to do here.
Finally, an understanding is reached after the arrival of a local chief.
I wouldn't say it's a big catch because we found more than that before. In the region, we've already found 100 tons in a single mission. But it's a good result. These are 100-kilo bags, as you can see, and they're well filled.
But on inspecting the rest of the house, there's a pleasant surprise.
We weren't expecting this, but here it is. There are at least 50 bags here, at least.
All in all, about 5 tonnes of cocoa were intercepted in this house. Cocoa which won't be leaving Ivorian territory. In Ivory Coast, the world's leading producer of cocoa, it is estimated that beans support 25% of the population. And this farmers' union is trying to raise awareness among planters who might be tempted to sell to traffickers.
Cocoa has made Ivory Coast what it is today. And it's thanks to coffee and cocoa that were leaders in West Africa and French-speaking Africa. So taking cocoa out of Ivory Coast goes against the interests of the nation.
You've listed everything that agriculture does for Ivory Coast, but what does it do for the farmer himself? You see, as a planter, the price for a bag of rice we feed our workers with has increased. Food prices generally have increased. We pay for our own products to treat the fields. You end up with almost nothing.
Unlike its neighbours who produce less cocoa, the Ivorian government sets the purchase price for growers before each season. The price of cocoa may have skyrocketed on the stock market following this season's catastrophic harvest, but the price per kilo has stagnated at 1,500 francs, or just over €2.
We don't know what the international market price is. But if we see that other countries want to buy our products from traffickers, then the price is high. We don't support criminals, but we do ask the government to increase the price.
When the others come, how much do they offer? Approximately.
Some say 2,500, others 5,000, others 3,000.
A tempting price for growers and their cooperatives, given they are subject to increasing constraints on the traceability of their cocoa, which translates into higher costs.
How's it going?
It's okay.
Well, let's take a look at your field. First, we'll check how many hectares it is, and then we'll check that it's not in a protected forest. That's what the white people ask, the ones who eat our cocoa.
Fabrice is in charge of sustainability at the Udan Cooperative. Mapping the plots of their 1,000 producers is one of the conditions to obtain the Rainforest Alliance label, which is what certifies them as deforestation-free.
You can see the time it takes and the volume of work.
Voluntary certification for which they receive a premium. But on the 1st of January next year, the EU, where 60% of Ivory Coast cocoa is currently exported, will impose its new deforestation regulations on planters, without, however, covering the consequential cost for them.
With the new regulations, all this is compulsory for every cooperative and all of their producers. So if you have a cooperative with 1,000 producers, you have to do it for all of them. We only have 1,000 producers, but we have 1,200 plots, because a producer can have 2 or 3 plots.
With just a few months to go before the implementation of these European regulations, tracing the origin of cocoa has become a matter of urgency for Ivory Coast. In 60 years, cocoa farming has already led to the destruction of 90% of the country's forests. In response, the government is trying to set up a digital identification system for planters.
If the producer has his card, we have all the information on it. We have the coordinates of his plot, where we know the cocoa comes from. The card is directly linked to a bank account, so he comes to where the cocoa is weighed, we issue the receipt, we pay him, and the payment is made directly on his card. The risk is that if there is no card, the cocoa can come from anywhere.
But despite the efforts of the authorities, it now seems highly unlikely that they will be able to equip all the country's growers by the end of the year. So, is deforestation-free cocoa an impossible task? A question being asked more and more, especially since the regulations are driving more growers to move to what is becoming the new hotspot for brown gold, Liberia. This is the case for Nufu, who crossed the border to cultivate these 52 hectares just a few kilometres from Ivory Coast.
The land is finished in Ivory Coast. In Ivory Coast, you can't buy land anymore. No one can give it to you. It's already classified. What belongs to the villagers, they've already divided up. The rest belongs to the government, the classified forest. We can't go there. That's why I came to Liberia.
Here in Liberia, fertile forest land is still plentiful, but the authorities are absent, so deforestation is well underway. The cause? Cocoa farmers pouring in from Ivory Coast. There are already 25,000 of them, twice as many as 3 years ago.
When you sow cocoa, you cut down the small trees and burn the big ones. Other trees are cut down with a saw. When the plantation is well exposed to the sun, the cocoa grows well.
Cocoa cultivation threatens 250,000 hectares of forest in Liberia. Without trees, the cocoa plantations grow rapidly, but yields are poor in the long term. That's Gello Kla Abel's argument, as he crosses the area with his NGO ID Cocoa in a bid to raise planters' awareness.
In Ivory Coast, there was a lot of deforestation. All the trees were cut down. Today, they're producing less than they should. We've come here to farm. And are we going to do the same thing that we did in Ivory Coast?
So who buys these beans linked to deforestation? To answer this question, we followed Nufu all the way to the Koffi River, which forms the border with Ivory Coast, where he and so many others sell their produce.
In Liberia, the price is better, but we can't get the cocoa there because there are no roads. So we go to Ivory Coast, which is easy for us. We sell with Ivorian trackers. When I'm asked, I say it's Liberian cocoa.
There's no surveillance here, so the cocoa crosses the border on these canoes. The Ivorian cooperatives then declare this cocoa as part of their production. An illegal practice, especially for those certified as free from deforestation. But it's common practice, particularly in villages close to the border.
Ivory Coast is working to prevent cocoa from coming into the country. They tell us they are ensuring traceability and therefore deforestation-free cocoa. Only they don't control what happens at the border. We have the same people who are planters in Para and Carrier who come here to plant and who return with a project to Ivory Coast to sell it. So we feel that the question of traceability has not yet been resolved.
A damaging situation for Ivory Coast, which wants to export clean cocoa, but also for Liberians, who don't always take kindly to migrants cultivating their land, a situation Gallo sought to better understand during a meeting with the local community.
During the 1990 war, we had to flee to La Côte d'Ivoire, and when we saw the benefit of farming, cocoa, let's just say cash. That's why we saw the migrant owning large cocoa farms on our side that helping the Ivorian. So when they decided to come in, we embraced them.
But now we are more cocoa farm. What impact we have for the villagers?
Liberia is not benefiting. In a sense that the growth and development of our cocoa here is making Côte d'Ivoire to go forward on the world market. This way, meaning we are improving the commercial system of La Côte d'Ivoire instead of our country. If the cocoa is going this way, perhaps we may have a good road system.
A wish for local development funded by the profits of cocoa cultivation, but which could never be realised if Liberia doesn't implement its own traceability system and a policy to fight deforestation.